What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel here from the GeekSpeakNation channel, and today I'm here to bring you my review of Spider-Man Miles Morales. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to bury the lead here. This is quite possibly my favorite Spider-Man game of all time. And this is high praise, considering I absolutely adore Spider-Man PS2, Spider-Man Web of Shadows, Spider-Man Web of Dimensions. I've played plenty of Spider-Man games in my time, and those are absolutely some of my favorites, and also including Spider-Man 2018, I think is when it came out. But the previous Insomniac Spider-Man game was absolutely fantastic. Even though I had some gripes with the combat and gripes with the web swinging, I truly think that it stood above all the other entries as the best Spider-Man game yet. However, in a very short amount of time, they've been able to cobble together a sequel that is, in my personal opinion, my favorite Spider-Man video game of all time. It is absolutely fantastic. It takes everything I loved about the first game and somehow makes it even better in ways that I never even imagined, which is absolutely fantastic. And then on top of that, it even gets rid of some things that I had a lot of gripes with the first game, and things that I didn't know how they were going to solve, but they were able to, especially with the hardware of the PlayStation 5, which is the console that I played this version of the game on. But to kick things off, let's talk about the story. And the story takes place not too long after the events of the last sets of DLC for the City Never Sleeps DLC for Spider-Man 2018, where we find Miles having to take up the mantle of Spider-Man while Peter is away on vacation. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the way that they kind of get Peter out of the story is it's very abrupt, because the opening sequence of the game happens and then Peter's like, yeah, I forgot to tell you, I'm about to be gone for like 5 to 8 weeks. Peace. And it's like, oh, okay, that's the way we're writing this situation. All right, that's one way to do it. But despite Peter's very abrupt departure from the story, his presence is still felt throughout the story nonetheless, because of one, Miles' adoration for him, and different gameplay elements that end up allowing him to be included in the story and his mentorship of Miles. But at the end of the day, they were still able to make a story that, yes, is about how Miles admires Peter Parker Spider-Man, but at the same time, this truly is a coming-of-age journey for him to embrace what it means to be his own Spider-Man, and what does it mean for him to face these responsibilities, and how is he going to handle these situations and right his wrongs. And the story does not fail in that department at all whatsoever. There's certain elements of the story that can be a little bit generic when you're discussing some of the villains and some of their motivations, and how a lot of the situations in the game involving a lot of the villains can be resolved if people just stopped, calmed down, and literally talked for like 30 seconds. And certain situations could be easily resolved. But despite some of those story cliches, I think that the way they tell this story for Miles Morales is great. Because oftentimes a lot of people think that if you see something coming, if you see a twist coming, if something kind of plays off as a cliche, that means that it's bad. And that's not necessarily the case. Something can have a very standard setup, but have a very unique payoff. And you get a lot of that in Miles Morales. Since this game is a lot shorter and a lot more condensed, it cuts out a lot of the filling in the story. So once you get a reveal of something maybe that you would have saw coming, immediately after, the game deals with those ramifications and shows you how it ends up affecting Miles in a very, very personal way. And I think that's the best way to describe this game and its story. It's just so personal. Everything is specifically devised, even if to a certainly maybe convoluted degree, by how much, you know, Miles is related to a lot of these people, or whether it's familial relationships or whether it's just knows them in general. But that's kind of the trend for Spider-Man games, right? Or Spider-Man stories in general. But despite all of that, they're still able to craft a story that is very personal to the core of who Miles is, and everything is built around developing him and molding him into the Spider-Man that he wants to be, and into the Miles that he wants to be, and the son that he wants to be, and the friend that he wants to be, and all these different responsibilities that he has. This is about him learning how to handle all of them and to become the best version that he can of it, of those versions of himself is the better way of putting it. But does that mean he succeeds? No. No. Not at all whatsoever. He fails often, but that is what makes him so engaging, is him having to genuinely deal with that failure and the consequences of it. And the story does that in such a wonderful, wonderful way. I think the villains that they do have for this story are great, and they work and they serve their purpose. And his supporting cast is absolutely fantastic. And they have certain sequences and emotional moments that had me crying on stream. But yeah, the way they handled that story was great, and it was so engaging the whole entire time through, and was for the most part very tightly written, and I think was very oh god, and my microphone, impactful overall. And in comparison to the 2018 Spider-Man game, I think the story for this game is better because it trims out all of the fat and all of the unnecessary fluff that's in it. Even when you have the same type of mission structure where you're going to do a main story mission, but it's just introducing you to another side activity that you can do in the game, the way that they interweave it into the story is much better in Miles Morales, and much better in the way that it can actually affect your perception of his character development depending on when you do and do not complete certain activities, which is absolutely wonderful because you'll get different dialogue related to what you were just doing for these activities, which is super, super cool and probably took a lot of time to do. But even though the story of Miles Morales doesn't quite hit the same emotional gut punch that the ending of Spider-Man 2018 does, because certain sequences that are just, it's very hard to top certain things that they did in that game with certain characters and their deaths that just inevitably are going to rip your heart out. But so it doesn't quite hit as hard at the end of this game as this one does, at the end of Miles Morales as Spider-Man 2018 does, but it is still a very, very effectively told story with a powerful ending and emotional one that got me, man. And so did some of the side activities. It was absolutely wonderful. The writing is on point in this game. However, as we all know, games are not meant to be watched, they're meant to be played. So how does Spider-Man Miles Morales play on the PlayStation 5? And I gotta tell you, it's absolutely fantastic. This is a great way to break in your PlayStation 5. I tried out both forms, the fidelity mode and the performance mode. So with the fidelity mode, you get the 4K resolution running at 30 frames per second with ray tracing on. And oh my god, the game is gorgeous. It is drop dead gorgeous. I could not believe what I was seeing some of the time. Ray tracing to me is a bit of a gimmick, yes. But when it's done properly, it can be very, very immersive, which is completely accurate. And for the most part, I did end up playing the game on that fidelity mode for the audience and playing it on Twitch, but I switched in between both of them. But after I have gone through and completed the story and like, oh, look, everything's so beautiful, I switched over to performance mode. I can't go back. With performance mode, you're going to have like a checkerboarded 4K resolution, so it's not native 4K, but it gives the illusion of it. It's still really beautiful looking, and ray tracing is turned off. However, the trade-off for that is 60 frames per second performance, and playing Miles Morales at 60 FPS, I can't go back. It's going to be very hard to go back for a lot of video games back to 30 frames per second when there's a 60 FPS option available. Even though it's nice that games can look extremely gorgeous and hyper realistic, at the end of the day, the combat becomes way more fluid, the web swinging becomes even more fluid, and you get more reaction time to certain attacks that were unreactable prior on the 30 frames per second mode. So yeah, it truly did help enhance the gameplay. Now, getting more nitty-gritty into the details of the gameplay in this game and how the combat actually works. I think this was a vast improvement on the systems that we had in the previous game. I think Spider-Man's playstyle in that game for Peter Parker was way too reliant on gadgets. A lot of thought was put into having a multitude or an arsenal of gadgets. I think it's like 8 or something on that weapons wheel in that game. And it just became too many. And then when you looked at the actual hand-to-hand combat in the game, it was a bit lacking because it felt like the most effective ways to take down enemies were doing the same, web them up in the air and then yank them down, and there wasn't much variation besides that. And on top of that, a lot of his animations were stuck to kicking for some reason. The only time Spider-Man would actually punch anybody in the game would be when he was launching them up in the air or doing a finisher, or if he was doing a web strike and going across the room to go punch somebody in the face. But beyond that, it's specifically the game went out of its way at all times to make sure he only kicked people, which is a very strange thing to notice, but once you do, you can't unsee it. Miles Morales does away with a lot of that stuff. So you cut down the gadgets in half, you add on his new Venom powers, so automatically you're already throwing in some new elements into the mix that keep gameplay fresh. And then on top of that, you have everything that you can do in the base game of the combat available for Miles. So what you have is something that is much more engaging, much more unique, and it gives you many more options to tie together different things that you want on top of the invisibility. And that's where Miles Morales' combat shines, is because of the options that you give. Even though they take away a little bit, they give you more in just the right departments in order to make sure that the experience stays engaging and that you feel like no two fights are always going to be the same all the time. There's only one gadget that I didn't end up liking. It was like a drone, like a holographic drone that you end up making. That was the only one I didn't end up liking in the story, that I thought was kind of mediocre because it doesn't combo into anything. It's kind of like the spider bots from the last game. It's just something you summon and it attacks autonomously. It's not something that needs skill and aim or practice, or something that you can combo into like the other gadgets that are available for him. But his Venom powers and the other 3 gadgets truly make up for that, and the visual splendor is wonderful when using the Venom attacks, but also the creativity of how you can tie them together is absolutely brilliant and so engaging. So I had such a good time doing the combat in this game, and I still do, and I think it is a vast improvement on the first game with all the different elements that they end up throwing into it. And to be honest, they're really going to have to step up Peter Parker's gameplay for whenever they do for Spider-Man 2, because man, I don't understand how I could go back after playing as Miles. It's just too good. But now let's talk about the part of any Spider-Man game that makes a Spider-Man game a Spider-Man game. Well, depending on it, the Spider-Man game just doesn't have it at all. But web swinging. Let's talk about web swinging. Web swinging to me is the most important part of a Spider-Man game. If that's not nailed right, then it's not going to hit the same or the way it needs to. I legitimately put hundreds of hours into Spider-Man PS2 just swinging through the city. I am addicted to the feeling of when you have that controller in your hand and you are got the persona of being Spider-Man and you were just swinging, flipping XX and release through the city. Something about that is just absolutely captivating and mesmerizing to me, and always has been ever since I was a kid. And it's been a while since I've played a Spider-Man game that truly matched up to that web swing. And that's not being like looking at it with like, oh, he's got nostalgia glasses on. Like, their momentum system and the way things were handled were brilliant. Were absolutely brilliant, and it had the best web swinging. I think the only thing that came close to it was probably, Spider-Man Web of Shadows. That had a lot of freedom to it as well. And I enjoyed Spider-Man's, the Insomniac's Spider-Man's first iteration of this web swinging, but it had a lot of flaws, and the main flaw that it had was momentum. You did not carry your momentum at all. You could dive bomb off of Avengers Tower, and then right before you hit the street, you'd flip and swing, and you'd move at a snail's pace. It's like you carried none of your momentum from the dive into your actual swing. So there was no sense of momentum at all when you're playing Insomniac's first game. And because of that, the web swinging felt very, very slow, and I felt like I was being very capped. However, when you're playing Miles, They did away with that. Your momentum is not only much faster in this game, because I feel like the PlayStation 5's SSD can actually handle rendering the game as quickly as Miles can move. Not only do you have multiple ways of traversing, not just because of your web swinging, but your Venom ability is helping out as well with the traversal. The web swinging is so smooth. It is absolutely so smooth. The fluidity of being able to do these air tricks, the dive tricks, going into a web swing, into a wall, running up and doing a Venom dash up inside the air. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. They somehow took the elements from the first game and within 2 years made it even better. Even better. And to me, improved it and perfected it somehow. And it's not that the first game's mechanics were bad, it's just I had a couple of gripes with them. And just that feeling of like, it didn't fully feel like I had control over this full speeding bullet going through New York City. But now I do. And Spider-Man Miles Morales has my favorite web swinging of any Spider-Man game of all time. Oh, I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. Overall, I'm sitting here and just thinking about everything that this game does, and it just does everything just brilliantly. From the story to the integration of character development through the side quests and the side activities that are wonderful and shed light on the world, the lore, and Miles Morales himself. The supporting cast is wonderful, the voice acting is wonderful, the graphics are out of this world, the performance is bonkers and hard to even comprehend how they even made this game happen. The level design is brilliant, it's masterful, and it's fun and engaging along with the combat. That is the best Spider-Man's ever had. It's the best web-swinging Spider-Man's ever had. Miles Morales comes to life in this game, and it's so funny hearing people say, oh, he doesn't have charisma, or he doesn't have this, or he doesn't have that, because everyone wants to compare him to Peter Parker, and he's not Peter Parker. He's his own character, and in this iteration he's coming into his own and trying to develop and become his own man, his own Spider-Man, and he's going to be different. And some people just obviously cannot accept that for some reason. I don't know why. You can love both of them. And that's what the game is trying to say, is that you can love both of them, yes. And what these characters represent, which is just doing good for the people who need help and just helping others and being a good person, being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in your own way. That's what these games have always been about. Why do you think the tagline is be yourself? This game hits on so many different levels, but what makes it truly transcend is its commentary that it has very subtly of trying to translate a lot of these things to the Black experience, or translate these things to possibly the LGBTQ experience and all this stuff. The way that they try to translate these things to try to speak to its audience about being different, or being, you know, feeling like you have things to live up to, or feeling like the world is against you. It speaks to you on so many different levels in that regard, and it does it masterfully, it does it subtly, it does it with tact, it does it with class, and it knocks the ball out of the park and into the next state. They knocked it out with this game. I was absolutely floored. Thank you, Insomniac Games, for making not only the best Spider-Man game I've ever played, the best superhero game I ever played, one of the most impactful video games I've ever played in quite some time. Thank you. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm giving Spider-Man Miles Morales a 10 out of 10. You need to play this game. You do. That being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like button and share it with friends and others and all that sort of stuff. And if you're new here, subscribe to become a part of the GeekSpeakNation channel. And if you are new here, make sure that you do hit that bell icon and set it to all, so you always get notified of when I post a new video. But if you are afraid if I'll get lost in YouTube's algorithm, that's okay, because I have a Discord now. So go down in the description down below or in the comment sections, and you will see the link to our Discord. That way we can chat it up, we can talk about this video, and I'll also give you notifications of when I upload a new video or when I go live on Twitch, which I will be today, probably by the time you're seeing this video. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Daniel. Don't forget to get geeky and be yourself.